So with all that out of the way, I want to introduce our speaker for tonight, Liz Ingram. So Liz Ingram, she is known to many of us. She is an artist who works in various media, including etching, lithography, digital print, and installation. She was born in Argentina, and she grew up in New Delhi, Mumbai, and Toronto. And for over 40 years, she taught here in the Department of Art and Design, and she was central to its printmaking program. She's currently a distinguished University Professor Emerita of printmaking and of drawing and intermedia. That is a long title to have. And her artworks have been exhibited in numerous solo and duo exhibitions, over 300 group exhibitions in addition to that, in North and South America, Europe, the Middle East, and the Far East. She's participated in biennials and triennials for many years and has received awards for her print exhibitions in Canada, Slovenia, Poland, Korea, Brazil, Estonia, England, and Finland. And as if all that was not enough, she's been the recipient of numerous honors, including being elected to the Royal Canadian Academy of Arts in 1998, receiving the Gordon Kaplan Award for Research Excellence at the University of Alberta, and being inducted into the City of Edmonton Hall of Fame, both in 2008, being elected into the Royal Society of Canada for her contribution to Canadian culture in 2009, being awarded the prestigious and competitive University Cup in 2011, and this year she received the Order of Canada, one of the highest national honors that can be bestowed on anyone. So before just turning over to Liz, who we're all here to hear, I just want to flag that her exhibition is downstairs. It's running through December 9th down in Fab, and she's kindly offered to all of the proceeds from the sale of her catalog. All of the proceeds, it's on sale for $30 cash or check only, but all of the proceeds are being donated to the department and the gallery. So I'm encouraging everyone to go see the show, buy a catalog, and join me in welcoming Liz Ingram.
Thanks so much, Natalie. I'm really scared. After, I think, is this on? No.
Sounds good.
Oh, I was supposed to turn this on and that off, right? Okay, so this is intimidating because it's home turf, and it's scarier on home turf than it is when you're far away, I think. I do want to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 6 territory, and I also want to say how much I appreciated at Tanya Harnett's opening the words of the elder who spoke about the sacredness of water, and it made me more aware of how much we have to learn from the Indigenous peoples in this territory. To carry on, 41 years I taught here, and I retired a year and a half ago. And I do want to start my presentation by talking about just how my whole art production, my life, my career is so much a collaborative effort. And to start with, it's collaboration with the Department of Art and Design. In all those years, it's been a fabulous place for me. I came here in 1973 as a graduate student. It was the first graduate program in studio practice in Canada. Some people aren't aware of that, but it's got a long history. And I came and was mentored by Walter Jewell and Lyndall Osborne. I was Lyndall Osborne's first graduate student, and I was lucky because I think I found myself in a place that was just the best for me. Lyndall and Walter were so energetic, young artists that had come here a few years before. They were visionary. They realized that in this place, which was rather remote, something could really percolate and happen. And so a few years later, I joined them, teaching as a sessional for 7 years, or a contract faculty, and later started as a tenure-track position in 1982. I have so many people here to thank for my work, for helping and being a part of my work. Mark Siegner, Stephen Dixon, who are the technicians in printmaking, colleagues in history, art, design, and visual culture, and also all the students, graduate students, and undergraduate students that really challenged me and helped me with my work and to conceive of things and produce. Also, during that time, we were building a program and really focused on trying to develop it as an international program. And I think we managed to succeed. It's an exciting place to this day, and wonderful, wonderful new colleagues, Marilyn Oliver, and also, of course, everybody knows Shawn, who's absolutely incredible. So we're very, very lucky, and I feel like I was just so privileged. Just a sec. The ideas that underlie my motivation and my decision to make art partially come from early experiences during my schooling at a convent in New Delhi. It was there that I first became fascinated by questions and ideas about the relationship between the sacred and the profane, the bodily and the spiritual. Much later, this preoccupation was replaced with questions coming from physics. As a high school student, I loved physics, and I thought a lot about the relationship and the mutability of matter and energy, which was another fundamental question that seemed to connect with the religious kind of ideas I was getting earlier on at the convent. And I thought later on that perhaps these kinds of musings about these kinds of ideas could lead to a deeper understanding of and connection to the life cycle and to our place on Earth. When I was first introduced to printmaking, I was instantly attracted to the joining of expressive, creative potentials with the somewhat scientific discipline of the techniques of the print media. In the 1970s and the early 1980s, I explored the integration of various photographic means with a variety of techniques, exploring the combination and synthesis of abstract expressive gestures with macroscopic photographic fragments of my own body. In those days, I used an SLR camera. I had an old Pentax SLR, and I just with 150 millimeter lens. But trying to get in close, I wanted macroscopic, but I had no money. And so I found out that if I just turned the lens around backwards and held it against the camera, it was incredible. It was a macro lens, very, very shallow depth of field, but I liked what it did. So I ended up using that throughout my graduate program. These were images, these earlier images are all from that period, and all employ that use of that lens. I also really used drawing a lot in the early days. It played a vital role in my creative development. I loved drawing, and I loved drawing from the model. So early on, I did quite a bit of drawing, and I haven't been doing much drawing other than incorporating into my prints, but I really am looking forward to in retirement getting back into actually just pure drawing. I believed that, or felt that, working from the model and life drawing, drawing from life, really stimulated my right brain intuitive decision making. I felt it was an exercise in identifying with the other and in transcending ego. I believe it's a kind of empathy training, and I see it as a synthesis, a bringing together of the presence of matter and the non-material as you draw. So then in 1980, I started a new collaborative project. I got together with Bernd Hildebrandt. Bernd is my husband and partner and father of my children, and he's also a collaborator now, and I'll talk more about that later. And this is out at Obed Lake, which has been a source of inspiration and an incredible place for me to develop work. It was in Bernd's family, a piece of property. It's a quarter section in the foothills in the boreal forest. And so I did a lot of drawing out there early on and used one of the cabins as a little studio. That happens to be a drawing horse that I swiped from the university. It's still out there. But you know, it doesn't have a sticker on it, so they don't know. So these are drawings that I did at that time, which were very detailed, and this was after graduate school, and I really was making prints, new prints, but also really got into drawing. And I would gather and collect detritus and little bits out at the lake of fragments from organic matter, and produce these drawings that started with those little fragments. I was also going around with that camera with the lens reversed. Little did I know there was such a thing as a lens reversal ring. I wasn't very technical. You could actually buy a ring and it would stick onto the camera, but instead I crawled around with this thing, and even after I discovered there was a lens reversal ring, I kept using this because somehow it was more precarious, and somehow some of the photos that came out of that were unexpected and the result of a kind of chance that I liked. So I continued to use that. And from these photos I developed prints that were, at that time, mostly lithographic. I developed or established a studio with two artists, Walter Jewell and Bonnie Schechter, and we imported this press from London, England, and we developed a studio in a warehouse near White Avenue and worked there for quite a time. We made a dark room out of black plastic, a whole room out of black plastic, and had to sometimes cover up little holes that developed. And we had made our own counters and worked there for quite a number of years. It was terrific. So all these prints were developed there, and I was already starting to create imagery that had the feeling of looking into shallow waters. At this time I wasn't working with the human body. I'd kind of moved away from that. And then in a little bit after that period, although here are some, that were also developed in that studio near White. This one's in the exhibition. And this is after working with all the lithography. I got my own press, and we moved out of that studio, and I started to work more in etching. And this is one of the big etchings. There were a number that I did that were quite labor intensive and large and challenging for me anyway, definitely challenging at the time. But I was using, again, what the water imagery is from Obed Lake. And we bought a house and right away knocked down the garage and built a studio instead. And a lot of people from here I don't know if anybody is here today who actually helped build this studio, but we had a lot of friends over that were helping us knock down the old garage and build the studio. So this was my studio for quite a number of years at that time. And this is one of the prints from that period. 1985. And then a big event in my life. I got pregnant. Always terrified of what was going to happen. Scared, very scared, because I thought, how can you make art? How can you teach? How can you do all these things and have a family? And it was a period where there was a kind of stigma attached to trying to be an artist and have a child and function. So I was really terrified that this would be it for my art, and not sure that I really wanted to get into this family thing with a child. So I desperately kept working in the studio. So I remember being like this and trying to wipe the plates, and then when finally Andreas, my son, was born, I fell in love like I'd never been in love before in my life. And that was it. It was amazing. And this is the first print. I did a series of prints right after he was born, sort of desperate to prove to myself that I could do it. And so two of those prints are in the show, and they're my just after the birth of Andy prints. And this is, after that I thought, how am I gonna get work done? You know, this is gonna be really hard because my work's quite time intensive. So I went to a workshop in Germany and worked with master printers. So this was my first time to do that, go in a little bit into a residency where they have a print workshop with master printers. And I did a series of color prints, each one with 6 etching plates, so quite involved. I could never have produced them on my own with my schedule. And Andy was, how old? 13 months, 14 months old. And my husband had brought him over to join me.
14.
And yeah, we spent time together there and then traveled around Europe. So it was a fabulous time, actually. That's a print from that series. And another one from that series. And also at that time, this is a bit later, I went back to drawing, and back to the use of the human body. And this was a period where I was pregnant with number 2 and thought, okay, I shouldn't be working with chemicals. I shouldn't be making prints. So I covered my press with plastic and sealed it all up, and then started drawing. Some of you, this is Lisa Murray, who was a colleague and a graduate student, and she modeled for me in the studio, and I decided I'd do drawings, but I did these great big drawings, kind of oversized life drawing. And the charcoal was everywhere, so it was probably more toxic than making prints. So I don't know, I put on a mask, a dust mask, but still couldn't stand it all the time, and did a series of drawings. And Blair might remember those because that was the last time I had a show in Fab. And it was upstairs, and it was all those big life drawings. And I started to make prints using the human figure again, and work directly on copper plates from the figure, combining it with photographic imagery of water. And this was done both through lithography and dry point, and I would dry point directly on the plate from the model, and I could never see what I was doing really because I was just incising copper. So it was really exciting and dramatic to take a proof because you couldn't see really very well what you'd done until you actually printed it. And here's a couple of other pieces from that period where I was really starting to work with water as a metaphor for life, and also trying to make imagery that where water and body were of equal presence and equal in the image, and moving in and out of each other. Water, the subject of my work, shifted to focus more directly on the environment through the use of images of water and the human body. This piece actually is my very first attempt with digital printing. So it was an iris print, and at the time I wanted to, I put it in the exhibition because it was a very first attempt with digital printing. But the iris printer could actually register things printing more than once. And I used this Abaca handmade paper, and I wanted to kind of dye the paper. So I went to this commercial place and worked with them, and they agreed to work with me and try stuff. So we printed each panel 3 times to get the ink to bleed through the paper. And but I kind of wrecked their machine over and over again. They had to replace the heads because the paper was so fibrous. So I never got to do that again. This is the year 2000. I had a sabbatical, and we decided to take the kids and just move to Germany for about 7 months to Europe. And I worked in a workshop there, again, master printers. Actually the same workshop I'd worked in the years before. I've done this now about 7 times. It's fabulous for anybody that ever thinks of doing something like that. And these are the prints that you see in the exhibition, the big 12-part piece print. So it looks almost like a digital print, but in those days, you know, I tried the iris print and nothing would saturate the way I wanted it to. All the inks were water soluble. So I actually produced the transparencies digitally, but I actually made 48 copper plates to print that piece. So here we are printing. The first image was the first 2 colors, and now it's the 3rd color, and this is the 4th color going on. And that's the section, and that's the piece. So just to give you a little idea of how I went from printing digitally back to printing by hand, and later on back to digital printing. Water for me acts as a metaphor for transition and transformation, and ultimately for the universal source of life. Water is unique, so changeable, so versatile, so transient, that it always remains kind of beyond our grasp. Yet we're basically made of water. In its physical manifestation, it shifts easily between solid, liquid, and gaseous states. As a symbol, it is one of the 4 fundamental Greek elements, and in all religious practices, it refers to purifying and cleansing, both physically and spiritually. I'm drawing attention to water's preciousness and vulnerability, and to its soothing and kind of magical quality. I believe that water has the capacity to bring us back into intimate contact with our oneness with our environment. in most of the earliest water-based works, I used myself as a model and the bathtub as a site for photography. And I was using these big, large format camera and over the bathtub and putting the big sheets of film in, and then we'd be in the dark with the film exposed, me in the bathtub doing something, and then I'd say, now, and he, Bernd, would flash the flash. So a lot of the early work was done in that way. Also, I got interested in what happens by accident in the studio when working in photography. And I used to move these lith films around on the light table and see how they flickered. And that led to, and using the digital pixels, that led to a series of works that employ that kind of pixelation and the flickering quality of that. Yes, so here's some more of that series. Oops, this one is also in the exhibition, and what I was trying to do too was layer them so they flicker and give the feeling of the kind of precariousness of the intangible quality of both of all matter, actually, and that kind of transition between physical matter and energy and water and body, and really trying to merge water and body. And I did this walkway, which also had the depth. The piece in the show, the round tall one, the walkway had that even more kind of depth to it with layers of image, so that a little bit when you put your foot down, you weren't quite sure when you were gonna hit the surface that was gonna hold you as you walked, to create a kind of precariousness and a feeling, a little bit of a feeling of insecurity as you walked across it. And there were images of me in the water and kind of a boiling kind of water. And out at the creek, out at the lake, it was like I was trying to create a little bit the creek, and later on you'll see work that came after out of the creek. In 2004, we moved into our new house and built a new studio. I have a place to print there, and also an open space, storage space, and an open space for working on installation and or drawing. It's been great. It's a wonder. I feel very fortunate to have it. So it's been a kind of the retirement. It's been a kind of easy transition into working away from the university, since I have this space, and I've been extremely busy with things since then. So these are some more prints that I did in 2006. Again, a project where I went to Germany and worked with the printers. And this is a long piece that I put together, and from it's again using images of me in the bathtub is where it all started. And this is a close-up of a section. You can see how the image is actually put together in sections due to the limitations of not having a 9-foot or 10-foot press. Then in 2008, I had a pretty important experience. This is me and my best friend, Lavita, when we were kids in India. And in 2008, I went back and reconnected with her after 47 years. And I went to do a residency again at the Lalit Kala Academy in Delhi, where I had lived as a child. So we got together and connected like we'd never been apart, which is really unusual. Often you have nothing in common, but we're in contact now. It was a fabulous experience working in the workshop. It was incredible. They have no health and safety at all. And I came with my mask, and I had my vegetable oil to clean my plates, and they would just pour benzene onto plates and clean them, and I'd have my mask on or run outside. But the big problem was when you ran outside, it was just as bad. So they had their reasons for not worrying about it too much, I think. But it was a fabulous experience, and you can see that the equipment really printed well, was very old though, and well used. Yeah. And it had a lot of effect on me, I think. Sandy Bromley is, I think she's here in the audience. She was with me. She's a sculptor. Some of you, many of you probably know Sandy and Sandy's work. So we were together and had a fabulous time there. These works came out of that experience, and I think it took a while for the color to seep in, but about after coming back from India, I think that's when Bernd and I really started to collaborate, so that, I mean, we really produced projects together equally. And we also really started to work with only imagery from Obed Lake. So this is us. I had curly hair then, I don't anymore, and I'll get to that. But this is Obed Lake. It's on the way, halfway between Hinton and Edson, and a fabulous location for us. We're just really fortunate to be able to be out there as much as we are. This is Bernd Hildebrandt's work. This is, what is it, 1996, at a show at Latitude 53. And so Bernd is an exhibit designer, artist, and poet. And this is using beaver logs, the bottom of the lake, and fire pits and all kinds of things to produce this wonderful installation work back then. Bernd is incredible. He'll jump into the creek. We've done photo shoots where he's come up with leeches all over him, and he doesn't care, and I go crazy, and he just wipes them off. He just is great and will jump in at any time. So here he jumped in and moved down the stream and out of the picture. This is a project that Shawn Caulfield and Tim Caulfield organized that I was involved in, called Imagining Science. And this was, I used images of Bernd in the creek, and this is how I just thought I'd throw this in, because it's how it all started. I just started collaging images together to create it, so you can see the number of images, and later used the large format images and had it stitched seamlessly in the computer together to produce these large-scale images for that exhibition. Shawn and Tim brought together scientists and bioethicists and artists for this, one of two projects like this. And we actually talked a lot and had a wonderful group meeting in Banff. And the result was that we used chromosomes in the images put together with the creek and Bernd, the body. And here's a close-up, and for the first time, Bernd's text is embedded in these images. So there's poetic text running through it. You had to get up close to read it, but once you got up close, you saw it and read it, the little red lines running through it. And then later on, there was kind of this feeling that we didn't keep up enough of a contact with the scientists. It was that one event, and then we all went off in our own ways. Maybe we got a little bit from the scientists in terms of imagery and ideas. They wrote essays, and the book published is really fabulous. If you could probably get it at the bookstore. It's called Imagining Science. But we talked about it, and Shawn and Tim too thought, well, we should do this again, try another project like that, where we are more engaged after the symposium. So this one was called Perceptions of Promise, and these are stem cells. So we worked with scientists, with stem cell scientists, and these are actually images of stem cells from one of the scientists in Toronto. And we produced this tent work for that show, which is a 3-sided tent that you walk into and walk through. Images of bodies in water turned red to maybe reference blood, and then the stem cells floating. And in a way, trying to humanize the kind of idea of stem cells, that stem cells are, they're us. You know, they're not something separate, something clinical, something only in the lab. So this is inside. There was a mirrored floor, and so when you walked in, again, it was kind of disorienting and maybe made the viewer feel a bit fragile, precarious. Kids seemed to enjoy it. And at the end, when you walked out, you came upon this poem that Bernd had written, and it was both in the voice of, when you read it, it could be you as thinking about it as the human participant, or it could be the voice of a stem cell. And some prints came out of that. There's a couple in the show that came out from that, after that, that I produced. Along the way, I've done a few commissions. This one is at the Edmonton International Airport. Some of you may have seen it there. And then, we worked on a commission. Bernd acted as project manager, because I really couldn't have done it without him, that's for sure. And we used dancers in this one. It was for the Jubilee Auditorium in Calgary, which is the home of the Alberta Ballet. So we used dancers, and we took, we used the drama studios up here for shooting, and then took them out to the lake and did a lot of shooting out at Obed Lake with them. And they were fabulous. You know, we just made sure cleared the bottom of the lake and had them dance. And then I had a couple of graduate students with buckets, and I climbed on a ladder and with the camera, and Bernd was kind of being the director, and these students had buckets, and every time Bernd, I guess Bernd would yell, "Now!" and they'd jump, and then the buckets of water would get thrown, and I'd shoot. And we did this for, I guess it was a few weekends in a row. And we took images of, water at Moline Canyon, lots and lots and lots, hundreds. And this is them installing the piece in the Jubilee in Calgary. And this is me when the piece is up and completed, to give you a sense of the scale, and that's the full piece. We did this book work in Germany again at a different workshop. It's called Keystone Press. And Bernd again jumping into the creek, and me in a swimming pool. I love swimming in the lake, but the creek is, I don't immerse myself in quite that way. And this bookwork that we produced, I'll go through this quite quickly because it's getting a bit late. Anyway, this is working at the workshop in Keystone Editions in Berlin. The bookwork is out in the exhibition, so you can see it. And this is Mockup. Bernd did the design work for the portfolio, and this is the mock-up for it, and here we are working on it. And this is a really fabulous bookbinder who we worked with just down the road from the print studio, and she produced from the mock-up this beautiful portfolio and box. And here are a few of the images. And this is Obed Creek, which is the site of many, many of the works that we've been doing more recently. There's Bernd again, flying down the creek. And this, the banners up above are two of the pieces that came out of that. For the tent, the red tent and the first banners, we tried all kinds of places because I wanted fabric that could read on both sides, and the only way to do that in the old days was with screen printing, and it was pretty coarse. So I wanted fine detail, and I wanted it to go through, and we finally found this place that would print a fabric that way, and it was a polyester, and we worked with this company in England, and for the Imagining Science and Perceptions of Promise, and these banners called surfacing. So all of those were done with that company, and we proof with FedEx. So we could send the files across, and we could have a fabric proof in the studio in sometimes the next day. The next day, or at the most 2 days later, and then we'd work on the files, send them back, and another proof would come. So it's the way that we were able to proof and finally have the production happen in Britain. This is another, later on, again working in Berlin on a project. These are also in the exhibition. Oh, this is my latest commission piece, which in Fort McMurray in the new airport, where I was trying to talk about how we have to look after water, I suppose was my, message in the piece. Here are some images of when we were producing the photography for pieces, and Susie Barlow, who's here, who's talking next week, has been an amazing collaborator. She's just like Bernd, she loves getting in the creek. And some of you who know Susie probably recognized her in some of the prints. That's Bernd. And there are some of the prints that were the result of those using the fabric in that way in the creek with the models. Close up. Oops. And this piece is in the show. I always wanted the fabric to be silkier than it was. I always wanted to print on silk. But you couldn't print, nobody was printing on silk and having it penetrate. And because the earlier works were dye sublimation, which means they print on paper, then they run it through heat to press the ink through the fabric to get the two-sided quality. Silk was too shifty, and they weren't working with silk. So again, another student, Gabby Perret, went to Oslo to grad school, and we were in contact with her. So this is students collaborating all the time and helping us to make work. We were talking to her about how I really wanted to work with silk. I want the movement of the fabric. I want the sensuality of the fabric and the relationship to the feeling of water. And she said, oh, one of the technicians here was doing something with silk. Anyway, through that contact, we found the Glasgow School of Art Centre for Advanced Textiles, who were printing directly on silk, inkjet printing directly on silk. And we sent them images and sent the same images to the old company. And when the proofs came, we were just blown away by how well the silk printed. So this piece is the result of that, very recent, this year. Whoops, that's in the show. The floor, the reflective floor with the text, again, words of Bernd's. And these are the pieces that came out of it. So this place, Obed Lake, this collaborator, it's supposed to be one of the richest places on the planet for plant life. And it's also under stress. And we sort of preserve that quarter section, try not to pick the wildflowers, try to keep it pretty much as it is. But we're also still engaged with attempting to connect in various ways. We have lots and lots of photo documentation that we want to use in works but haven't had time to yet, and we'll still keep documenting. This is Bernd a few years ago, or last year maybe, and there's this rich soil, and just in an attempt to connect. There he is, all covered in this rich, incredible peat that is the source of all that amazing plant life and the diversity. Obed Lake. I wanted to read this because I love it. It's Natalie wrote it, and she uses a quote from Gregory Bateson, and I'm going to read it even though it's up there. When Bateson tells us, there are times when I catch myself believing that there is such a thing as something that is separate from something else. He is underscoring the difficulty of escaping human exceptionalism, but also the necessity of trying. I just love that because I think that's what we are doing. We're trying, just trying to get over that separation. Indeed, what brings ecology and collaboration together is a willingness to work not simply across, but with difference. Bateson is not suggesting that everything is the same or even that everything is unified. Rather, he is arguing that we live in a world that is held together by difference, that we ourselves are sets of differences, differences that are relationally connected through patterns, alliances, and collaborations. Differences do not separate, they bind, they hold together. It is these patterns interacting that produce life as we know it. I think that there's one other thing that is very personal, but I want to share it with you. In 2014, I was diagnosed with lung cancer, and I've been working to get over it and try to stay healthy, of course. But what it really brought home to me is that what we were doing to our water, to our environment, to the land, to ourselves, it's inside us. It's not, we're not separated. So, you know, that I really understand. And think about it. 2 out of every it's probably 2.3 now, 2.3 out of every, out of 2.3 people, 1 will get cancer. So, and it's rising. And it's not rising slowly. So, what I do want to bring is a kind of love, I suppose, and a pleasure in what a wonderful world we have, but also some sense of what we're doing to it. So I guess that's it. So I'm hoping to take some questions. Any questions? Yeah. No? Oh, Shawn! Make it hard.
I think it's a tough one because it's one I think about a lot.
Yeah.
Thinking about the environment and want to make work about the environment, but making lots of stuff. Using lots of chemicals,
Yeah.
ordering FedEx,
Yeah.
using industrial printers. How do you negotiate that?
I guess it's a question of weighing. It's always a question of weighing, right? And I hope that, and maybe I'm wrong, that the amount that I use, the amount that I do to the environment is balanced out and maybe heavier on the side of increasing awareness. I don't know, but that's what I hope. I mean, everything we do, right, is we're damaging. We're partially adding to the carbon footprint. But on the other hand, we still have to do things to try to mitigate what's happening and the scale that it's happening at. So I guess I do think about it. I do feel guilty often when I travel so much because I think that's not great for the environment. But it's that whole balancing act, I guess. It's not that I don't think about it and worry about it. I do. Yeah, I think there's so many things we can do in our personal lives. And I'm not nearly as far along as I would like to be, the way we live. You know, every little bit, I think, can help when you're in the way you live. Yeah, no, it's not an easy question. And you have to kind of in your head weigh getting this out there, using the collaboration, Bernd's words, the landscape, as a way to kind of maybe raise awareness in someone, somewhere. Yeah. But, yeah, too, we hope that we still be able to live well without doing damage someday. I mean, I hope that's the direction we're heading in. I mean, it's often really depressing. I worry so much about kids because of, the outlook. It's hard to be really positive. We're living in a whole new age. But then on the other hand, we never know. Things happen that we don't expect. Things change faster than we expect. Yeah, so. Any other questions? Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Can you speak to how your work changes when you collaborate as opposed to solo working?
Yeah, I think it gets a lot richer. Bernd and I, our particular collaboration was always there, I think, in that we talked to each other about what we were doing. He in his design, me in my art, so there was kind of this critiquing and discussion often going back and forth. But to actually collaborate and work together, it's two minds and two visions, and yeah, I think it's opened me up a lot. Yeah, I think it's helped me to go beyond what maybe I would have done if without it. I really appreciate how we're able to integrate poetry and words into the work, and also the three-dimensionality that Bernd helped bring to the work, and also, yeah, just how I think it's enriching. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But I should just add to that, the vision comes from this, and the sort of art direction. There's got to be some focus, and that comes from this exclusively.
From both of us. Yeah.
Could you speak a bit to the process of working with a master printer? Like, is that something that you initiate? Do you submit something? Do you contact them, or how
Well,
does the collaboration in that sense come to?
In this case, when I was younger, the way it happened was a bit serendipity. I went to, not the first time, I went to Kettlehern Print Workshop, which doesn't exist anymore. And the second time I went there, when I did the big piece that's in the show, the 12-part piece, I was assigned a young printer who was an apprentice from a small town near there. And yeah, and the reason I went there was because of Carl Haywood, who was a printmaker from Ontario, who told me about the place, who did a lot of printing in print workshops around the world. And that's how I got connected with that place in the first instance. But actually I got a grant and was able to, it did cost. It wasn't a residency that was free, right? It did cost. And so very often I've done it with grants. But that young master printer or apprentice printer ended up traveling around the world working as a master printer. And I met him in Germany many years later, and he and his Canadian partner, who he met at Tamarind Institute, actually said they were establishing a print workshop in Berlin. So I said, well, I'm coming, because we really had a great time working together in the past. And so now I've gone there and spent a few months there 3 times, 4 times, I can't even remember. It's fabulous. It's really, I mean, there's something about focusing yourself in the studio that can't be replaced by that experience. But there's also something really exciting about working in that way with printers. You can get a lot more done a lot faster, for one thing. And it's also just a great tradition, I think. It comes out of the Japanese tradition, and yeah, it has a whole history. Did I answer? Is that what you were? Yeah?
Thanks.
Right there, Liz.
Yeah.
Liz, I was wondering about the sonic in your work. So your work's very evocative, and when I look at it, sometimes there's a tactility that's evoked, but also sometimes something sonic, something is evoked that way, but also sometimes literally you're working with sound or concerned with sound. So I wondered if you could speak to that, if that's something that concerns you.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody went to the show when it wasn't the opening, there is a soundtrack playing of water and breathing. But it's the only time I've ever actually made a soundtrack for a work. And it actually originally was for that walkway. But I'm bringing back snippets from the past for this show, I wanted to include that soundtrack, which is just the creek at Obed, the bubbling water, and me breathing kind of integrated together. So very much related to the imagery. I would like to work more with sound. I'd love to. It's just up until now, I just haven't had the chance. The same with getting back to drawing. I have all these things I want to do, and yeah, but it's been so busy. Retirement, you know, I remember hearing people say, retirement's really busy, it's so busy, and I think, oh yeah, but it is. It's been really busy. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah, but I'd like to use also sounds of other sound pieces from the environment at Obed. Yeah. Oh, April, I forgot the prince.
No, I forgot. Liz,
Yeah.
if you could travel back to 1982, what advice would you give to young Liz?
1982, what happened then?
Well, I mean, not early 80s. At the beginning of your career as an artist, what advice? What have you learned? What would you tell yourself?
I guess I'll go back to what my dad said. When someone asked him that question when he was 101, he said, they asked, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to a young person my age? And he said, don't take yourself too seriously. I thought that was great coming from him. But it's partly that, you know, the fact that we get so tangled up and we're scared because of it, taking ourselves too seriously. And that inhibits, and it inhibited me often, from just doing things, trying things, you know, that might not work out and if they're big, it's really bad, you know, but just not worrying about that, not taking yourself so seriously, so you have the courage just to dive ahead and try things, you know, and risk. And I suppose that's it, because, you know, I was pretty chicken in the early days.
Are there any last questions? So if there are no more questions, please join me in giving one more round of applause to Liz.